Chapter 11 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Jeffery Farnol. Chapter 11 of The Man with the Tiger Mark. It is a moot question as to whether a curl can be more alluring when it glows beneath the fiery kisses of the sun, or shines demurely in the tender radiance of the moon. As Bellew looked at it now, that same small curl that nodded and beckoned to him above Anthea's left ear, he strongly inclined to the latter opinion. "Adam tells me that you're going out, Miss Anthea." "Only as far as Mrs. Dibbin's cottage, just across the meadow." "Adam also informs me that Mrs. Dibbin is a witch." "People call her so." "Never in all my days have I seen a genuine old witch, so I'll come with you, if I may." "Oh, this is a very gentle old witch, and she is neither humpback, nor does she ride a broomstick, and so I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, Mr. Bellew." "Then, at least, I can carry your basket. Allow me." And so, in his quiet, masterful fashion, he took the basket from her arm, and walked on beside her, through the orchard. "What a glorious night it is!" exclaimed Anthea suddenly, drawing a deep breath of the fragrant air. "Oh, it is good to be alive! In spite of all the cares and worries, life is very sweet." After this, they walked on some distance in silence, she gazing wistfully upon the beauties of the familiar world about her, while he watched the curl above her ear until she, becoming aware of it all at once, promptly sent it back into retirement with a quick, deft little pat of her fingers. "I hope," said Bellew at last, "I do sincerely hope that you tucked up my nephew safe in bed, you see." "Your nephew, indeed!" "Well, our nephew, then. I ask, because he tells me that he can't possibly sleep, unless you go to tuck him up, and I can quite believe it." "Do you know, Mr. Bellew, I'm growing quite jealous of you. He can't move a step without you, and he is forever talking and lauding your numberless virtues." "Oh, but then, I'm only an uncle after all, and if he talks of me to you, well, he talks of you to me, all day long." "Oh, does he?" "And, among other things, he told me that I ought to see you when your hair is down, and all about you." "Oh!" exclaimed Anthea. "Indeed, our nephew is much luckier than I, because I never had an aunt of my own to come and tuck me up at night, with her hair hanging all about her, like a beautiful cloak. So, you see, I have no boyish recollections to go upon, but I think I can imagine—" "And what do you think of the Sergeant?" Anthea inquired, changing the subject abruptly. "I like him so much that I am going to take him at his word, and call upon him at the first opportunity." "Did Aunt Priscilla tell you that he comes marching along regularly every day, at exactly the same hour?" "Yes, to see how the peaches are getting on," nodded Bellew. "For such a very brave soldier he is a dreadful coward," said Anthea, smiling. "It has taken him 5 years to screw up enough courage to tell her that she's uncommonly young for her age, and yet, I think it is just that diffidence that makes him so lovable. And he is so simple, and so gentle in spite of all his war medals. When I am moody and cross, the very sight of him is enough to put me in humour again." "He has never spoken to Miss Priscilla?" "Never, though, of course, she knows, and has done from the very first. I asked him once why he had never told her what it was brought him so regularly to look at the peaches, and he said, in his quick, sharp way, 'Miss Anthea, can't be done, ma'am. A poor battered old soldier, only one arm. No, ma'am.'" "I wondered if one could find just such another sergeant outside Arcadia," said Bellew. "I wonder." Now, they were approaching a stile towards which Bellew had directed his eyes from time to time, as, for that matter, curiously enough, had Anthea, but to him it seemed that it never would be reached, while to her it seemed that it would be reached much too soon. Therefore, she began to rack her mind, trying to remember some gate or any gap in the hedge that should obviate the necessity of climbing it. But before she could recall any such gate or gap, they were at the stile, and Bellew, leaping over, had set down the basket, and stretched out his hand to aid her over. But Anthea, tall and lithe, active and vigorous with her outdoor life, and used to such things from her infancy, stood a moment hesitating. To be sure, the stile was rather high, yet she could have vaulted it nearly, if not quite, as easily as Bellew himself, had she been alone. But then, she was not alone. Moreover, be it remembered, this was in Arcadia of a midsummer night. Thus, she hesitated, only a moment, it is true, for, seeing the quizzical look in his eyes that always made her vaguely rebellious, with a quick, light movement, she mounted the stile, and there paused to shake her head in laughing disdain of his outstretched hand. Then there was the sound of rending cambric. She tripped, and next moment he had caught her in his arms. It was for but a very brief instant that she lay, soft and yielding, in his embrace, yet she was conscious of how strong were the arms that held her so easily, ere they set her down. "I beg your pardon, how awkward I am!" she exclaimed in hot mortification. "No," said Bellew, shaking his head, "it was a nail, you know, a bent and rusty nail, here, under the top bar. Is your dress much torn?" "Oh, that is nothing, thank you." So they went on again, but now they were silent once more, and very naturally, for Anthea was mightily angry, with herself, the stile, Bellew, and everything concerned, while he was thinking of the sudden warm clasp of her arms, of the alluring fragrance of her hair, and of the shy droop of her lashes as she lay in his embrace. Therefore, as he walked on beside her, saying nothing, within his secret soul he poured benedictions upon the head of that bent and rusty nail. And presently, having turned down a grassy lane, and crossed a small but very noisy brook that chattered impertinences among the stones and chuckled at them slyly from the shadows, they eventually came upon a small and very lonely little cottage, bowered in roses and honeysuckle, as are all the cottages hereabouts. But now Anthea paused, looking at Bellew with a dubious brow. "I ought to warn you that Mrs. Dibbin is very old, and sometimes a little queer, and sometimes says very surprising things." "Oh, excellent!" nodded Bellew, holding the little gate open for her. "Very right and proper conduct in a witch, and I love surprises above all things." But Anthea still hesitated, while Bellew stood with his hand upon the gate, waiting for her to enter. Now he had left his hat behind him, and, as the moon shone down on his bare head, she could not but notice how bright and yellow was his hair, despite the thick black brows below. "I think I would rather you waited outside, if you don't mind, Mr. Bellew." "You mean that I am to be denied the joy of conversing with a real live old witch, and having my fortune told?" He sighed. "Well, if such is your will, so be it," said he obediently, and handed her the basket. "I won't keep you waiting very long, and thank you," she smiled, and, hurrying up the narrow path, she tapped at the cottage door. "Come in! Come in!" cried an old, quavering voice, albeit very sharp and piercing. "That be my own soft dove of a maid, my proud, beautiful white lady. Come in, and bring him with you. Him as is so big and strong, him as I've expected so long, the tall, golden man from overseas. Bid him come in, Miss Anthea, that Goody Dibbin's old eyes may look at him at last." Hereupon, at a sign from Anthea, Bellew turned in at the gate, and, striding up the path, entered the cottage. Despite the season, a fire burned upon the hearth, and, crouched over this, in a great elbow chair, sat a very bent and aged woman. Her face was furrowed, and seamed with numberless lines and wrinkles, but her eyes were still bright, and she wore no spectacles. Likewise, her white hair was wonderfully thick and abundant, as could plainly be seen beneath the frill of her cap, for, like the very small room of this very small cottage, she was extremely neat and tidy. She had a great curving nose, and a great curving chin, and what with this and her bright black eyes and stooping figure, she was very much like what a witch should be, albeit a very superior kind of a witch. She sat for a while, staring up at Bellew, who stood tall and bareheaded, smiling down at her, and then, all at once, she nodded her head 3 several and distinct times. "Right!" she quavered. "Right! Right! It be all right! The golden man as I've watched this many a day, with the curly hair, and the sleepy eye, and the tiger mark upon his arm. Right! Right!" "What do you mean by tiger mark?" inquired Bellew. "I mean, young master with your golden curls, I mean as, sitting here day in and day out, staring down into my fire, I has my dreams. Leastways, I calls 'em my dreams, though there's them as calls it the second sight. But pray sit down, tall sir, on the stool there, and you, my tender maid, my dark lady, come you here, upon my right, and if you wish, I'll look into the ink, or read your pretty hand, or tell you what I see down there in the fire. But no, first show what you have brought for old Nanny in the blessed basket, the fine strong basket as holds so much. Yes, set it down here, where I can open it myself, tall sir. Eh, what's this? Oh, tea! Oh, God bless you for the tea, my dear, and eggs and butter, and a cold chicken. The Lord bless your kind heart, Miss Anthea. Oh, my proud lady, happy the man who shall win ye, happy the man who shall wed ye, my dark, beautiful maid. And strong must he be, aye, and masterful he who shall wake the love light in those dark, great, passionate eyes of yours. And there is no man in all this world can do it, but he must be a golden man, with a tiger mark upon him. Why, oh, Nanny! Aye, blush if you will, my dark lady, but Mother Dibbin knows she's seen it in the fire, dreamed it in her dreams, and read it in the ink. The path lies very darker for ye, my lady. Aye, very dark it be, and full of cares and troubles. But there's the sun shining beyond, bright and golden. You be proud, and high, and scornful, my lady. It is in your blood. You need a strong hand to guide ye, and the strong hand shall come. By force you shall be wooed, and by force you shall be wed. And there be no man strong enough to woo and wed ye, but him as I've told ye of, him as bears the tiger mark." "But, Nanny," said Anthea again, gently interrupting her, and patting the old woman's shriveled hand, "you're forgetting the basket. You haven't found all we've brought you yet." "Aye, aye," nodded old Nanny, "the fine strong basket. Let's see what more be in the good kind basket. Here's bread, and sugar, and—" "A pound of your favourite tobacco," said Anthea with a smiling nod. "Oh, the good weed, the blessed weed!" cried the old woman, clutching the package with trembling fingers. "Ah, who can tell the comfort it has been to me in the long, long days, and the long, long nights, the blessed weed, when I've sat here a-looking and a-looking into the fire. Oh, God bless you, my sweet maid, for your kindly thought. and with a sudden gesture, she caught Anthea's hand to her lips, and then, just as suddenly, turned upon Bellew. "And now, tall sir, can I do aught for ye? Shall I look into the fire for ye, or the ink, or read your hand?" "Why, yes," answered Bellew, stretching out his hand to her. "You shall tell me 2 things, if you will. First, shall one ever find his way into the Castle of Heart's Desire? And secondly, when?" "Oh, but I don't need to look into her hand to tell you that, tall sir, nor yet in the ink, or in the fire, for I've dreamed it all in my dreams. And now, see you, 'tis a strong place, this castle, with thick doors, and great locks and bars. But I've seen those doors broke down, those great locks and bars burst asunder. But there is none can do this but him as bears the tiger mark. So much for the first, and for the second. Happiness shall come riding to you on the full moon. But you must reach up, and take it for yourself, if you be tall enough." "And even you are not tall enough to do that, Mr. Bellew," laughed Anthea as she rose to bid old Nanny good night, while Bellew, unnoticed, slipped certain coins upon a corner of the chimney-piece. So old Nanny blessed them, and theirs, past, present, and future, thoroughly and completely, with a fine comprehensiveness that only a genuinely accomplished old witch might hope to attain to, and, following them to the door, paused there with one shriveled, claw-like hand uplifted towards the sky. "At the full of the moon, tall sir," she repeated, "at the full of the moon. As for you, my dark-eyed lady, I say, by force you shall be wooed, and by force you shall be wed, aye, aye. But there is no man strong enough except he have the tiger mark upon him. Old Nanny knows, she's seen it in the ink, dreamed it in the fire, and read it all in your pretty hand. And now, thank ye for the tea, my pretty, and God bless ye for the good weed, and just so sure as you've been good and kind to old Nanny, so shall fortune be good and kind to you, Miss Anthea." "Poor old Nanny," said Anthea, as they went on down the grassy lane. "She is so very grateful for so little, and she is such a gentle old creature, really, though the country folk do call her a witch, and are afraid of her because they say she has the evil eye, which is ridiculous, of course, but nobody ever goes near her, and she is dreadfully lonely, poor old thing." "And so that is why you come to sit with her, and let her talk to you?" inquired Bellew, staring up at the moon. "Yes." "And do you believe in her dreams and visions?" "No, of course not," answered Anthea rather hurriedly, and with a deeper colour in her cheeks, though Bellew was still intent upon the moon. "You don't either, do you?" she inquired, seeing he was silent. "Well, I don't quite know," he answered slowly, "but she is rather a wonderful old lady, I think." "Yes, she has wonderful thick hair still," nodded Anthea, "and she's not a bit deaf, and her eyes are as clear and sharp as ever they were." "Yes, but I wasn't meaning her eyes, or her hair, or her hearing." "Oh, then pray what were you pleased to mean?" "Did you happen to notice what she said about a man with a tiger mark?" inquired Bellew, still gazing up at the moon. Anthea laughed. "The man with a tiger mark! Of course. He has been much in her dreams lately, and she has talked of him a great deal." "Has she?" said Bellew. "Ha!" "Yes, her mind is full of strange twists and fancies. You see, she is so very old, and she loves to tell me her dreams, and read the future for me." "Though, of course, you don't believe it," said Bellew. "Believe it?" Anthea repeated, and walked some dozen paces or so before she answered. "No, of course not." "Then, none of your fortune, nothing she told you has ever come true?" Once more Anthea hesitated, this time so long that Bellew turned from his moon-gazing to look at her. "I mean," he went on, "has none of it ever come true? About this man with the tiger mark, for instance?" "No, oh, no," answered Anthea rather hastily, and laughed again. "Old Nanny has seen him in her dreams, everywhere, in India, in Africa, in China, in hot countries, in cold countries. Oh, Nanny has seen him everywhere, but I have seen him nowhere, and of course, I never shall." "Ah!" said Bellew. "And she reads him always in your fortune, does she?" "And I listen very patiently," Anthea nodded, "because it pleases her so much, and it is all so very harmless after all, isn't it?" "Yes," answered Bellew, "and very wonderful." "Wonderful? Poor old Nanny's fancies? What do you mean by wonderful?" "Upon my word, I hardly know," said Bellew, shaking his head, "but there are more things in heaven and earth, etc., you know, and this is one of them." "Really? Now you grow mysterious, Mr. Bellew." "Like the night," he answered, turning to aid her across the impertinent brook that chuckled at them, and laughed after them, as only such a very impertinent brook possibly could. So betimes they reached the stile, and crossed it, this time without mishap, despite the lurking nail, and, all too soon for Bellew, had traversed the orchard, and were come to the garden where the roses all hung so still upon their stems that they might have been asleep, and filling the air with the perfume of their dreams. And here they paused, perhaps because of the witchery of the moon, perhaps to listen to the voice of the nightingale, who sang on more gloriously than ever. Yet, though they stood so close together, their glances seldom met, and they were very silent. But at last, as though making up her mind, Anthea spoke. "What did you mean when you said old Nanny's dreams were so wonderful?" she asked. "I'll show you," he answered, and while he spoke, slipped off his coat, and drawing up his shirt sleeve, held out a muscular white arm towards her. He held it out in the full radiance of the moon, and thus, looking down at it, her eyes grew suddenly wide, and her breath caught strangely as surprise gave place to something else, for there, plain to be seen upon the white flesh, were 3 long scars that wound up from elbow to shoulder. And so, for a while, they stood thus, she looking at his arm, and he at her. "Why," she said at last, finding voice in a little gasp, "why, then—" "I am the man with the tiger mark," he said, smiling his slow, placid smile. Now, as his eyes looked down into hers, she flushed sudden and hot, and her glance wavered, and fell beneath his. "Oh!" she cried, and with the word, turned about, and fled from him into the house. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Jeffery Farnol. Chapter 12, in which may be found a full, true, and particular account of the sale. "Uncle Porges, there's a little man in the hall with a red nose and a blue chin." "Yes, I've seen him. Also his nose and chin, my Porges." "But he's sticking little papers with numbers on them all over my Auntie Anthea's chairs and tables. Now what do you suppose he's doing that for?" "Oh, who knows? It's probably all on account of his red nose and blue chin, my Porges. Anyway, don't worry about him. Let us, rather, find our Auntie Anthea." They found her in the hall, and it was a hall, here at Dapplemere, wide and high, and with a minstrel's gallery at one end. A hall that, years and years ago, had often rung with the clash of men-at-arms, and echoed with loud and jovial laughter, for this was the most ancient part of the manor. It looked rather bare and barren just now, for the furniture was all moved out of place, ranged neatly round the walls, and stacked at the farther end, beneath the gallery where the little man in question, blue of chin and red of nose, was hovering about it, dabbing little tickets on chairs and tables, even as Small Porges had said. And in the midst of it all stood Anthea, a desolate figure, Bellew thought, who, upon his entrance, bent her head to draw on her driving gloves, for she was waiting for the dog-cart which was to bear her and Small Porges to Cranbrook, far away from the hollow tap of the auctioneer's hammer. "We're getting rid of some old furniture, you see, Mr. Bellew," she said, laying her hand on an antique cabinet nearby. "We really have much more than we ever use." "Yes," said Bellew, but he noticed that her eyes were very dark and wistful, despite her light tone, and that she had laid her hand upon the old cabinet with a touch very like a caress.
"Why is that man's nose so awful red, and his chin so blue, Auntie Anthea?" enquired Small Porges in a hissing stage whisper. "Hush, Georgy, I don't know," said Anthea. "And why is he sticking his little numbers all over our best furniture?" "That is to guide the auctioneer." "Where to, and what is an auctioneer?" But at this moment, hearing the wheels of the dog-cart at the door, Anthea turned, and hastened out into the sunshine.
"A lovely day it do be for driving,"
said Adam, touching his hat, "and Bess be thinking the same, I do believe," and he patted the glossy coat of the mare, who arched her neck, and pawed the gravel with an impatient hoof. Lightly, and nimbly, Anthea swung herself up to the high seat, turning to make Small Porges secure beside her, as Bellew handed him up. "You'll look after things for me, Adam?" said Anthea, glancing back wistfully into the dim recesses of the cool old hall. "Aye, I will that, Miss Anthea." "Mr. Bellew, we can find room for you if you care to come with us." "Thanks," said he, shaking his head, "but I rather think I'll stay here, and, help Adam to look after things, if you don't mind." "Then, good-bye," said Anthea, and, nodding to Adam, he gave the mare her head, and off they went. "Good-bye!" cried Small Porges, "and thank you for the shilling, Uncle Porges." "The mare is, rather fresh this morning, isn't she, Adam?" inquired Bellew, watching the dog-cart's rapid course. "Fresh, sir? And that's rather a dangerous sort of thing for a woman to drive, isn't it?" "Meaning the dog-cart, sir." "Meaning the dog-cart, Adam." "Why, Lord love you, Mr. Bellew, sir!" cried Adam with his great laugh, "there ain't nobody can handle the ribbons better than Miss Anthea. There ain't a horse as she can't drive, or ride, for that matter. Not nowheres, sir." said Bellew, and, having watched the dog-cart out of sight, he turned and followed Adam into the stables. And here, sitting upon a bale of hay, they smoked many pipes together in earnest converse, until such time as the sale should begin. As the day advanced, people began arriving in twos and threes, and, among the first, the auctioneer himself. A jovial-faced man was this auctioneer, with jovial manner and a jovial smile. Indeed, his joviality seemed, somehow or other, to have got into the very buttons of his coat, for they fairly winked and twinkled with joviality. Upon catching sight of the furniture, he became, if possible, more jovial than ever, and, beckoning to his assistant, that is to say, to the small man with the red nose and the blue chin, who, it seemed, answered to the name of Theodore, he clapped him jovially upon the back, rather as though he were knocking him down to some unfortunate bidder, and immediately fell into business converse with him, albeit jovial still. But all the while intending purchasers were arriving. They came on horse, and afoot, and in conveyances of every sort and kind, and the tread of their feet, and the buzz of their voices awoke unwonted echoes in the old place. And still they came, from far and near, until some 100-odd people were crowded into the hall. Conspicuous among them was a large man with a fat red neck which he was continually mopping at, and rubbing with a vivid bandana handkerchief scarcely less red. Indeed, red seemed to be his pervading colour, for his hair was red, his hands were red, and his face, heavy and round, was reddest of all, out of whose flaming circumference 2 diminutive but very sharp eyes winked and blinked continually. His voice, like himself, was large, with a peculiar brassy ring to it that penetrated to the farthest corners and recesses of the old hall. He was, beyond all doubt, a man of substance, and of no small importance, for he was greeted deferentially on all hands, and it was to be noticed that people elbowed each other to make way for him, as people ever will before substance and property. To some of them he nodded, to some he spoke, and with others he even laughed, albeit he was of a solemn, sober, and serious nature, as becomes a man of property and substance. Between whiles, however, he bestowed his undivided attention upon the furniture. He sat down suddenly and heavily in chairs. He pummelled them with his plump, red fists, whereby to test their springs. He opened the doors of cabinets. He peered into drawers. He rapped upon tables, and altogether comported himself as a thoroughly knowing man should, who is not to be hocussed by veneer, or taken in by the shine and splendour of well-applied beeswax. Bellew, watching all this from where he sat screened from the throng by a great carved sideboard, and divers chairs and what-nots, drew rather harder at his pipe, and, chancing to catch Adam's eye, beckoned him to approach. "Who is that round, red man yonder, Adam?" he inquired, nodding to where the individual in question was engaged at that moment, poking at something or other with a large, sausage-like finger. "That," replied Adam in a tone of profound disgust, "that be Mr. Grimes of Cranbrook, sir. Calls hisself a corn chandler, but I calls him, well, never mind what, sir. Only it weren't at corn chandling as he made all his money, sir, and it be him as we all work and slave for, here at Dapplemere Farm." "What do you mean, Adam?" "I mean as it be him as holds the mortgage on Dapplemere, sir." "Ah, and how much?" "Over £3,000, Mr. Bellew, sir," sighed Adam, with a hopeless shake of the head, "and that be a powerful lot of money, sir." Bellew thought of the sums he had lavished upon his yacht, upon his 3 racing cars, and certain other extravagances. £3,000, $15,000. It would make her a free woman, independent, happy. Just $15,000, and he had thrown away more than that upon a poker game before now. "Lord!" exclaimed Adam, "the very sight of that there Grimes's pig eyes a-staring at Miss Anthea's furniture, do make the old Adam rise up in me to that amazing extent, Mr. Bellew, sir. I just look at him a-thumping and a-pounding at that there chair." Saying which, Adam turned, and, elbowing his way to where Mr. Grimes was in the act of testing the springs of an easy-chair, he promptly, and as though forced by a struggling mob, fell up against Mr. Grimes, and jostled Mr. Grimes, and trod heavily upon the toes of Mr. Grimes, and all with an expression of the most profound unconsciousness and abstraction, which, upon the indignant corn chandler's loud expostulations, immediately changed to a look of innocent surprise. "Can't you look where you're going, you clumsy fool?" fumed the irate Grimes, redder of neck than ever. "Oh, ax your pardon, Mr. Grimes," said Adam solemnly, but what with people's legs, and chair legs, and the legs of tables, not to mention sideboards and cabinets, which, though not having no legs, ain't to be by no manner of means despised therefore, what with this and that and t'other, I am that confined, or, as you might say, confused. I don't know which legs is mine, or yourn, or anybody else's, Mr. Grimes, sir. I make so bold as to ax your pardon all over again, sir. During which speech, Adam contrived once more to fall against, to tread upon, and to jostle the highly incensed Mr. Grimes back into the crowd again. Thereafter he became a nemesis to Mr. Grimes, haunting him through the jungle of chairs and tables, pursuing him into distant corners and shady places where, so sure as the sausage-like finger poised itself for an interrogatory poke, or the fat, red fist doubled itself for a spring-testing punch, the innocent sinning Adam would thereupon fall against him from the rear, sideways, or in front. Meanwhile, Bellew sat in his secluded corner, watching the crowd through the blue wreaths of his pipe, but thinking of her who, brave though she was, had nevertheless run away from it all at the last moment. Presently, however, he was aware that the corn chandler had seated himself on the other side of the chiffonier, puffing and panting with heat and indignation, where he was presently joined by another individual, a small, rat-eyed man, who bid Mr. Grimes a deferential "Good day."
"That there Adam," puffed the corn chandler, "that there Adam ought to be throwed out into the stables where he belongs. I never see a man with so much growed to feet and elbers in all my days. He ought to be took," repeated the corn chandler, "and shook, and throwed out into the yard."
"Yes," nodded the other, "took, and shook, and throwed out, neck and crop, sir. And now, what might you think of the furniture, Mr. Grimes?"
"So-so, Parsons," nodded Grimes, "so-so."
"Shall you buy?"
"I am a-going," said the corn chandler with much deliberation. "I am a-going to take them tapestry cheers, sir, likewise the grandfeyther clock in the corner here, likewise the four-post bedstead with the carved headboard, and most particular, Parsons, I shall take this here sideboard. There ain't another piece like this in the county as I know of. Solid mahogany, sir, and the carvings." And herewith he gave 2 loud double knocks upon the article of furniture in question. "Oh, I've had my eye on this sideboard for years and years, knowed I'd get it some day, too. The only wonder is, she ain't had to sell up before now."
"Meaning, Miss Anthea, sir?"
"Ah, her. I say as it's a wonder to me, what with the interest on the mortgage I owed on the place, and one thing and another, it's a wonder to me she's kept her head above water so long. But mark me, Parsons, mark me, she'll be selling again soon, and next time it'll be lock, stock, and barrel, Parsons."
"Well, I don't hold with women farmers myself,"
nodded Parsons.
"but as to that cupboard over there, Sheraton, I think, what might you suppose it to be worth, betwixt friends now?"
inquired Parsons, the rat-eyed.
"I can't say I've seen it, and likewise felt it,"
answered the corn chandler, rising.
"Let me lay my hand upon it, and I'll tell you, to a shilling."
And here they elbowed their way into the crowd. But Bellew sat there, chin in hand, quite oblivious to the fact that his pipe was out long since. The tall old grandfather clock, ticking in leisurely fashion in the corner behind him, solemn and sedate as it had done since, as the neat inscription upon the dial testified, it had first been made in the year of grace 1732 by one Jabez Havisham of London. This ancient timepiece now uttered a sudden wheeze, which, considering its great age, could scarcely be wondered at, and thereafter, the wheezing have subsided, gave forth a soft and mellow chime, proclaiming to all and sundry that it was 12 o'clock. Hereupon the auctioneer, bustling to and fro with his hat upon the back of his head, consulted his watch, nodded to the red-nosed, blue-chinned Theodore, and, perching himself above the crowd, gave 3 sharp knocks with his hammer. "Gentlemen," he began, but here he was interrupted by a loud voice upraised in hot anger.
"Confound you for a clumsy rascal! Will you keep them elbers o' yourn out of my waistcoat, eh? Will you keep them big feet o' yourn to yourself? If there ain't enough room for you, out you go, d'ye hear? I'll have you took, and shook, and throwed out where you belong. So just mind where you come a-tramping and a-treading."
"Tread?"
repeated Adam. "Lord, where am I to tread? If I steps backwards, I tread on ye. If I steps sideways, I tread on ye. If I steps forward, I tread on ye. It do seem to me as I can't go nowhere, but there you be a-waiting to be trod on, Mr. Grimes, sir."
Hereupon the auctioneer rapped louder than ever, upon which the clamour subsiding, he smiled his most jovial smile, and once more began. "Gentlemen, you have all had an opportunity to examine the furniture I am about to dispose of, and as fair-minded human beings, I think you will admit that a finer lot of genuine antique was never offered at one and the same time. Gentlemen, I am not going to burst forth into laudatory rhodomontade, which is a word, gentlemen, that I employ only among an enlightened community such as I now have the honour of addressing. Neither do I suppose to waste your time in purposeless verbiage, which is another of the same kind, gentlemen. Therefore, without further preface or preamble, we will proceed at once to business. The first lot I have to offer you is a screen, 6 foot high. Bring out the screen, Theodore. There it is, gentlemen. Open it out, Theodore. Observe, gentlemen, it is carved rosewood, the panels hand-painted, and representing shepherds and shepherdesses, disporting themselves under a tree with banjo and guitar. Now, what am I offered for this hand-painted antique screen? Come."
15 shillings,
from someone deep hidden in the crowd.
"Start as low as you like, gentlemen. I am offered a miserable 15 shillings for a genuine, hand-painted 16.
This from a long, loose-limbed fellow with a patch over one eye and another on his cheek.
"A pound,"
said Adam promptly.
"A guinea,"
nodded he of the patches.
25 shillings,
said Adam. "At 25 shillings," cried the auctioneer, "any advance? A genuine, hand-painted, antique screen, going at 25, at 25, going, gone, to the large gentleman in the neckcloth, Theodore."
"There be that Job Jagway, sir,"
said Adam, leaning across the sideboard to impart this information.
"Over yonder, Mr. Bellew, sir. Him as was bidding for the screen, the tall chap with the patches. 2 patches be pretty good, but I do wish I'd give him a couple more while I was about it, Mr. Bellew, sir."
Here the auctioneer's voice put an end to Adam's self-reproaches, and he turned back to the business in hand. "The next lot I'm going to dispose of, gentlemen, is a fine set of 6 chairs with carved antique backs and upholstered in tapestry. Also 2 armchairs to match. Wheel 'em out, Theodore. Now, what is your price for these 8 fine pieces? Look 'em over, and bid accordingly."
30 shillings,
again from the depths of the crowd. "Ha, ha! You joke, sir," laughed the auctioneer, rubbing his hands in his most jovial manner. "Oh, you joke! I can't see you, but you joke, of course, and I laugh accordingly. Ha, ha, ha! 30 shillings for 8 fine, antique, tapestried, hand-carved chairs. Oh, very good, excellent upon my soul."
£3,
said the fiery-necked corn chandler.
"Guineas,"
said the red-eyed parsons.
£4,
nodded the corn chandler.
£4.10,
roared Adam.
5,
nodded Grimes, edging away from Adam's elbow.
£6.10,
cried Adam.
"7,"
from Parsons.
8,
said Grimes.
10,
roared Adam, growing desperate.
11,
said Grimes, beginning to mop at his neck again. Adam hesitated. £11 seemed so very much for those chairs that he had seen Prudence and the rosy-cheeked maids dust regularly every morning, and then, it was not his money after all. Therefore Adam hesitated, and glanced wistfully towards a certain distant corner. At £11, this fine suite of hand-carved antique chairs, at £11, at 11, going, 15, said a voice from the distant corner, whereupon Adam drew a great sigh of relief, while the corn chandler contorted himself in his efforts to glare at Bellew round the sideboard. £15, chanted the auctioneer. I have 15. I am given 15. Any advance? These 8 antique chairs, going at 15. going, for the last time, going, gone, sold to the gentleman in the corner, behind the sideboard, Theodore."
"They were certainly fine chairs, Mr. Grimes,"
said Parsons, shaking his head. "So-so," said the Chandler, sitting down heavily. "So-so, Parsons." And he turned to glare at Bellew, who, lying back in an easy chair with his legs upon another, puffed at his pipe, and regarded all things with a placid interest. It is not intended to record in these pages all the bids that were made as the afternoon advanced, for that would be fatiguing to write, and a weariness to read. Suffice it that lots were put up, and regularly knocked down, but always to Bellew or Adam, which last, encouraged by Bellew's bold advances, gaily roared down, and constantly outbid all competitors with such unhesitating pertinacity that murmurs rose and swelled into open complaint, in the midst of which the fiery-visaged corn chandler, purple now between heat and vexation, loudly demanded that he lay down some substantial deposit upon what he had already purchased, failing which, he should, there and then, be took and shook and throwed out into the yard.
"Neck and crop,"
added Mr. Parsons. "That seems to be a fair proposition," smiled the auctioneer, who had already experienced some doubts as to Adam's financial capabilities, yet, with his joviality all unruffled, "that seems to be a very fair proposal indeed, if the gentleman will put down some substantial deposit now?" "Aye, for sure," nodded Adam, stepping forward, and, unbuttoning a capacious pocket, he drew out a handful of banknotes. "Shall I give ye £100, or will 50 be enough?" "Why," said the auctioneer, rubbing his hands as he eyed the fistful of banknotes, £10 will be all that is necessary, sir, just to ensure good faith, you understand." Hereupon Bellew, beckoning to Adam, handed him a like amount which was duly deposited with the auctioneer. So, once more, the bidding began. Once more, lots were put up, and knocked down, now to Adam, and now to Bellew. The bed with the carved headboard had fallen to Adam after a lively contest between him and Parsons and the corn chandler, which had left the latter in a state of perspiring profanity, from which he was by no means recovered, when the auctioneer once more rapped for silence. "And now, gentlemen, last but by no means least, we come to the gem of the sale, a sideboard, gentlemen, a magnificent mahogany sideboard, being a superb example of the carver's art. Here is a sideboard, gentlemen, which, if it can be equalled, cannot be excelled. No, gentlemen, not if you were to search all the baronial halls and lordly mansions in this land of mansions and baronials. It is a truly magnificent piece, in perfect condition, and to be sold at your own price. I say no more. Gentlemen, how much for this magnificent mahogany piece?" £10. 11. 15. 17, said Adam, who was rapidly drawing near the end of his resources. 18. This from Job Jagway. "Go easy there, Job," hissed Adam, edging a little nearer to him. "Go easy now." 19. 20, said Job. 21, roared Adam, making his last bid, and then, turning, he hissed in Job's unwilling ear. "Go any higher, and I'll pound you into a jelly, Job."
25,
said Parsons. 27, 28, 30, nodded Grimes, scowling at Adam.
32,
cried Parsons. 36, 37, 40, nodded Grimes.
"That drops me,"
said Parsons, sighing and shaking his head. "Ah!" chuckled the corn chandler. "Well, I've waited years for that sideboard, Parsons, and I ain't going to let you take it away from me, nor nobody else, sir." "At 40, cried the auctioneer, "at 40, this one," nodded Bellew, beginning to fill his pipe. 41's the bid. I have 41 from the gent in the corner. 45, growled the corn chandler. 6, said Bellew. 50, snarled Grimes.
"1," said Bellew. "Gent in the corner gives me 51," chanted the auctioneer. "Any advance?" "At 51." "55," said Grimes, beginning to mop at his neck harder than ever. "Add 10," nodded Bellew. "What's that?" cried Grimes, wheeling about. "Gent in the corner offers me 65, at 65, this magnificent piece at 65. What, are you all done? At 65, and cheap at the price. Come, gentlemen, take your time, give it another look over, and bid accordingly." The crowd had dwindled rapidly during the last hour, which was scarcely to be wondered at, seeing that they were constantly outbid, either by a hoarse-voiced, square-shouldered fellow in a neckcloth, or a dreamy individual who lolled in a corner and puffed at a pipe. But now, as Grimes, his red cheeks puffed out, his little eyes snapping in a way that many knew meant danger, with a large D, as the rich corn chandler, whose word was law to a good many, turned and confronted this lounging, long-legged individual, such as remained closed round them in a ring, in keen expectation of what was to follow. Observing which, the corn chandler, feeling it incumbent upon him now or never to vindicate himself as a man of property and substance, and not to be put down, thrust his hands deep into his pockets, spread his legs wide apart, and stared at Bellew in a way that most people had found highly disconcerting, before now. Bellew, however, seemed wholly unaffected, and went on imperturbably filling his pipe. "At 65," cried the auctioneer, leaning towards Grimes with his hammer poised, "at 65, will you make it another pound, sir? Come, what do you say?" "I say, no, sir," returned the corn chandler, slowly and impressively. "I say no, sir! I say, make it another 20 pound, sir!" Hereupon, heads were shaken, or nodded, and there rose the sudden shuffle of feet as the crowd closed in nearer. "I get 85! Any advance on 85? 86, said Bellew, settling the tobacco in his pipe bowl with his thumb. Once again, the auctioneer leaned over and appealed to the corn chandler, who stood in the same attitude, jingling the money in his pocket. "Come, sir! Don't let a pound or two stand between you and a sideboard that can't be matched in the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. Come, what do you say to another 10 shillings? "I say, sir," said Grimes, with his gaze still riveted upon Bellew, "I say, no, sir. I say, make it another 20 pound, sir." Again there rose the shuffle of feet, again heads were nodded, and elbows nudged neighbouring ribs, and all eyes were focused upon Bellew, who was in the act of lighting his pipe. 106 pounds, cried the auctioneer, at 1/6, at 1/6. Bellew struck a match, but the wind from the open casement behind him extinguished it. "I have 106 pounds. Is there any advance? Yes or no? Going at 106. Adam, who up till now had enjoyed the struggle to the utmost, experienced a sudden qualm of fear. Bellew struck another match. "At 106 pounds, at 1/6, going at 106 pounds. A cold moisture started out on Adam's brow. He clenched his hands, and muttered between his teeth. Supposing the money were all gone, like his own share, supposing they had to lose this famous old sideboard, and to Grimes of all people. This and much more was in Adam's mind, while the auctioneer held his hammer poised, and Bellew went on lighting his pipe. "Going at 106! Going! 50 up!" said Bellew. His pipe was well alight at last, and he was nodding to the auctioneer through a fragrant cloud. "What?" cried Grimes. "How much?" "Gent in the corner gives me 156 pounds, said the auctioneer, with a jovial eye upon the corn chandler's lowering visage. 156. All done? Any advance? Going at 156. going, going, gone! The hammer fell, and with its tap, a sudden silence came upon the old hall. Then, all at once, the Corn Chandler turned, caught up his hat, clapped it on, shook a fat fist at Bellew, and, crossing to the door, lumbered away, muttering maledictions as he went. By twos and threes the others followed him, until there remained only Adam, Bellew, the auctioneer, and the red-nosed Theodore. And yet there was one other, for, chancing to raise his eyes to the minstrel's gallery, Bellew espied Miss Priscilla, who, meeting his smiling glance, leaned down suddenly over the carved rail, and very deliberately threw him a kiss, and then hurried away with a quick, light tap-tap of her stick. End of chapter 12.